guest, one speaker here. Elaine, I'm not calling you a guest anymore. But Dan Ferris is here. Please, everybody, welcome him. He's curious about the club. He found us on the Green Up website. And I'm going to let Debbie introduce the speaker. Anora, welcome back. So my Rotary Minute person has joined, but oh, there he is. Hi, Martin. Would you like to give us a Rotary Minute once you're unmuted? No, he's back.
Yeah, I'm okay. Here I am. I had a
Good morning.
for a second there. Right. So we've had a tiny bit of discussion about women in Rotary, and I don't know if before I came on board there was more talk about that, but but this was spurred by an experience I related maybe a couple of months ago about attending a Rotary meeting in Sydney where the attendees were basically all male. Actually, I didn't attend it. Barbara did because I wasn't a member at that point. So she broke some sort of boundary in that club. But this was like 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there. At any rate, I decided I would do a little bit of research about the history of women in Rotary. And so briefly, between the early 1900s, when Rotary first formed, through the early to mid 1970s, this was a very straightforward story. No women allowed. Some Rotary spouses were members of what was called the Inner Wheel Club, which was a kind of auxiliary. And apparently Paul Harris' wife made a lot of speeches about Rotary. It has to be said, of course, that there were not a lot of women-only volunteer organizations in the US, which dated to the Revolutionary era. Interestingly, the first Irish clubs discussed admitting women in 1912, but it basically didn't go anywhere. So things remained completely static until 1976. At that time, the Rotary Club of Duarte, California, admitted 3 women as members. They did not ask for permission. And of course, the charters of the club specified that they were men only. The Rotary International asked them to remove these members. And when they didn't do so, their charter was revoked. The Duarte Club filed a successful suit claiming that Rotary clubs are business establishments subject to regulation under California's Civil Rights Act, which bans discrimination on race, gender, religion, or ethnic origin. Rotary International appealed the decision to the Supreme Court. The Rotary International attorney argued, and I like this one, that, quote, the decision threatens to force us to take in everyone like a motel. The Duarte Club was not completely alone. There were a few other clubs that challenged the men-only business, including a Seattle club, which voted to admit women in 1986. But this really was settled in 1987 by the United States Supreme Court, which confirmed the California Duarte decision. Rotary International then removed the gender-only clause in the club charters. Fittingly, the first female club president to be elected was Sylvia Whitlock of the Duarte Club in 1987. And by 2007, there was a female trustee of Rotary's, the Rotary Foundation, and female district governors and club presidents were common by that time. Currently, women account for something like 23% of Rotary International members and about 30% in North America. In 2013, a woman began a term for the first time as a Rotary International vice president. In 2019, the first woman to serve as vice chair of the Rotary Foundation and then the chair of the foundation. In 2022, the first Rotary International president was a woman served as Rotary International president for the first time, a woman named Jennifer Jones. So in 2004, in recognition of this momentous change, 100 years after its founding, the Rotary motto was changed from "He profits most who serves best" to "They profit most who serve best." And I think this is really exemplified by our club, where the women members are such incredible contributors. I dare say better than the men. But at any rate, So that's my little review of women in Rotary. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And I'm happy to say that 40% of our membership is women. Susan will give us an inspiration.
Good morning. Well, the last time that Sally asked me to offer an inspiration was the first meeting in January. And as it was the start of the new year, I thought to share some quotes about hope that I found inspiring. I recently came across this quote from Greta Thunberg that speaks to the connection between hope and action. Greta said, "Once we start to act, hope is everywhere. So instead of looking for hope, look for action." When we feel discouraged about a problem in our community or in the world, such as inequality, environmental degradation, erosion of human rights, or the harms of disease or homelessness, our spirits can be lifted and our hopes revived when we see someone or some organization doing something about it. And I think our hope is lifted even further when we ourselves, instead of despairing or becoming resigned to a problem, we ourselves take action. In recent years, Rotary International has adopted the slogan, "People of Action." The People of Action campaign was developed to address the realization that although many people recognize Rotary's name, many don't understand who we are or what we do. The People of Action message is a way of talking about ourselves so that people outside of Rotary better understand what connects us as committed volunteers who channel our energy, skills, and expertise into taking action to solve problems in our communities and around the world. I imagine that for each of us in this club, a reason we choose to be part of Rotary is that opportunity to act and to create hope for ourselves and others. We'll hear from our speaker today about an organization working to address hunger in our state. There are a number of people in this club who focus a lot of energy toward this cause, so they are taking action. And through their action, they are giving hope to the hungry and to our community. Their example inspires us all to continue taking action in our own small ways to create hope in the world. And by the way, create hope in the world is the theme for our upcoming Rotary year that starts in July.
On that note, if any of you want to become involved in the Williston Food Shelf, speak to me, please. There are several Rotarians actually who come over to the food shelf once a month to help with the delivery from the food bank. Thank you, Chris and Andrew, who's not here, Walter. Just a couple of business things, actually a few. Although this is not our blood drive, there is a blood drive on May 31st at Cross Point Church. And Elaine Brand from the Red Cross has asked me if we would help promote it. So I will put a Front Porch Forum post. Can any of you take a poster to put up somewhere? I noticed that Eric's not here today. We put one up in the town. I'll put one up at the food shelf in my gym. Okay.
Thank you.
Chris, did you want one? Okay, great. Oh, good idea. I'll do that. So it's at Cross Point Church on May 31st. If you missed our blood drive because of something else you had to do and you are willing to give, please think about giving at this blood drive. We have parkers for the Isham events. One today, so Andy and Jean are parking on Saturday. Jude and Marty are parking, I think at 12:30, is that right?
Yes.
12:30. If you want to wear a Rotarian vest and you don't have one, there's still some in the closet. Jerry? Yeah, so you hopefully you've heard about the Isham event barn, from want of a better title, sorry. There are lots of events that take place up at Isham's farm at their event barn, including our changeover on the 29th of June. And Mike has again very generously allowed us to use the barn. And to thank him, we are going to park cars for 2 of his events, one today and one on Saturday. And if you're driving around Williston, or Dan, if you're driving around Williston, go out Oak Hill Road and you will go past the Isham family farm. Anything else I should say about Isham's? Oh, yeah, there are events. These are some of the events at the barn that are coming up. There's a wonderful theater there, Isham Barn Theater. So if you're looking for something social to do, it's a good opportunity. Changeover is June 29th. For the newbies, that's when we change over our leadership. Susan Cote will become our new president. It's also our annual meeting. And so we'll have Jeannie present a rather succinct treasurer's report for the year. It'll start at 6. If you can come before 6 to help set up, that would be great. It's BYOB. It will be $10 a person. The club is paying for the difference. Did you want to say something?
Well, point of order, are we meeting that morning?
No,
Okay.
no, that's
Clarify.
instead of our meeting that day. Visitors are welcome if you want to come and socialize with the club. And you'll hear more about it as we get a little bit closer, but that's mainly what you need to know. The new president will be Susan. The president-elect will be Elizabeth. And our vice president is Vince. Thank you, Vince. These are the lineups we're asked to set up in Rotary for the upcoming years. It helps to get the new people involved in leadership before they actually have to be president of the club. And there's, yes, Phil. Thank you, Phil. Yeah, there's always. I'll be sure and put that on the agenda for the annual meetings. Phil's particularly sensitive to this because as soon as we vote, he has to put it into the website. There's a lot of conversation going on now about the 5K run, which, as you know, is coming up for the 4th of July celebrations. This year it will be on Saturday, July 1st, because the 4th is on a Tuesday. We're putting out advertisements out there for runners because this is a timed competitive run. It's going to take almost everybody in the club to help make it happen, because we have people to register, people to set up, get ready for the actual run, people along the course that will be giving out water. And then the race results will also be very important. We'll be giving out awards. It's growing in its popularity, so we need everybody to be willing to show up and help. So we'll be telling you more about it as we get closer. Okay, so Debbie, I think you're on.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Our speaker for today is Anore Horton. She's the executive director of Hunger Free Vermont, position she's been in since, I believe, 2018. And for 7 years before that, she managed Hunger Free Vermont's nutrition initiatives. Before that, she worked in higher education for over 15 years, teaching the history of social movements and public policy in the US and Latin America, and as a consultant to faculty and academic programs on course and curriculum design and assessment. She received her master's in teaching from the University of San Diego, a place that has much nicer weather than Vermont, and her master's in history from Princeton University. And she is a homegrown person. She lives right here in Williston with her spouse and a couple of cats. So please help me welcome Anore Horton.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me at the Williston-Richmond Rotary Club today. And this is my second time here, so I recognize a few of you from the last time I was here, which was, I don't know, a few years ago now already. I mean, time. What happened to time during the pandemic? I Do not know. Well, so let me just start by telling you a little bit about Hunger Free Vermont. I don't know how many of you are familiar with us and the work that we do, but we are a nonprofit organization. We are statewide, and our mission is to end the injustice of hunger for everyone in Vermont. And we do that through a variety of ways. But what often confuses people about our organization is that we don't do it by collecting food, distributing food, or running food programs. So that is the really important and valuable work of the Vermont Food Bank and the whole network of food pantries and food shelves all around our state. And of course, I just heard you all talking about your support for the food shelf here in Williston. And there are close to 400 food shelves and food pantries and congregate meal sites all around our state. And that's a really critical system for making sure that people have food that they need right now in the moment when they are hungry and desperate and they don't have any other way to access food. So that's really important to work to feed people right now today. But that is never going to end hunger. So our job at Hunger Free Vermont is to work on creating permanent systems that will stop people from needing to use food shelves and food pantries as an ongoing, every month way that they have to supplement the other ways that they get food. So we do that through a kind of a range of things, but fundamentally we work on expanding and protecting and letting people know about the many different federal nutrition programs that we all collectively, we created through Congress, we pay for through our taxes all during our working lives. And they're actually programs that we all have a right to benefit from when we need them. But they're often not described that way. And they often don't work very well for people. So Hunger Free Vermont works to change that. And we work to change that at the federal level. We work to change that through changes in state agency rules in Vermont and also through legislation in Vermont. And we also work to educate the people who help people apply for those programs or who operate those programs, like schools and childcare providers and summer and after school programs for kids and senior centers and area agencies on aging that operate Meals on Wheels programs and community action agencies and food shelves and food pantries that help people apply for 3 Squares Vermont. So there are a lot of different federal nutrition programs. So school breakfast and lunch and meals in childcare and in adult daycare and Meals on Wheels and meals for kids in the summer and after school and 3 Squares Vermont. And how many of you have heard of 3 Squares Vermont? Okay, many of you. So it's that is Vermont's name for SNAP. How many of you have heard of SNAP? Okay, that's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So that's its name at the federal level. And before it was called SNAP, it was called food stamps. So, but every state got to name the program whatever they wanted, which is nice, but also super confusing. So Vermont chose 3 Squares Vermont. So when you hear 3 Squares Vermont, that's SNAP, and it's Vermont's name for that federal program. All right, so how many of you heard have heard during this legislative session or the last couple about the bill for universal school meals? Okay, how many of you know that Debbie introduced the first bill for universal school meals in 2020, right before the pandemic hit? And we had other things, the legislature had a few other things they had to worry about. But it is now 2023. And so Hunger Free Vermont, we partnered with Debbie and other key legislative champions, but that has been a signature project of ours. And the bill has passed the legislature. And what it would do is provide breakfast and lunch to all students at all public schools without individually charging their families for those meals and without collecting individual household income information from families. Instead, it would use some different provisions in the federal meal programs, the school breakfast and lunch programs, and those programs provide reimbursements for every meal that schools serve to students that meet federal guidelines and nutrition requirements. It would use some different provisions to determine how much reimbursement schools would get kind of on a universal basis, rather than requiring every family to fill out their form and report a lot of detailed personal financial information to their schools. And rather than categorizing students by their family income in the cafeteria and determining who's allowed to have a meal and who isn't, based on something that kids actually have no control over whatsoever. So we're really excited, and that's a really good example of how we worked with schools. One of the things we do is provide technical assistance to schools, free customized consulting to help them figure out how they can help more students use their meal programs, how they can get meal programs up and running if they don't have them, things like that. And we've done that for years. This is our 30th year in existence as an organization, and we've made a huge amount of progress. And yet there were so many students at schools who were not eating meals, including students who were income eligible for them, including students who were signed up for them. And that's because of the stigma and the feeling, there's nothing worse than being singled out and seen as different from your friends when you're a young person. And that's what the program, the way it was created at the federal level, that's what it was doing for kids. And on any given day in Vermont, 32% of the students who were signed up for free school meals weren't eating them. So that's a huge number. And those kids were going hungry. And the more we talked to students, the more we found out that students whose families could afford to pay for meals were feeling really badly about eating them at school, because every single student we talked to had at least one friend who they knew was spending their lunch hour in the library because they couldn't afford meals, and they were too embarrassed to do anything about it, or they simply couldn't do anything about it, and they went hungry every day. So that's every school. I've never talked to a single school in Vermont, and I've been to almost all of them, where that situation was not the case. So finally, working with school nutrition folks, working with the Vermont teachers unions, working with the principals and superintendents, doing a lot of strategizing, we determined that the only way to solve that problem was to go for a universal meals model, and to make sure that all students had access to those meals, and to start treating meals at school as an educational support expense. Just like we treat paving the parking lot at school and having janitorial services and all of those other things that the education fund funds. If you actually look at the research, none of that makes as much of a difference for kids learning as making sure that they have a nutritious breakfast and lunch while they're at school. So that is what the bill will do. And it also provides a pathway for independent schools to participate in the program where their publicly tuitioned students will be covered with education fund money, but they have to cover their privately tuitioned students. So there's about 25 independent schools that are participating in the program, which is running kind of on a pilot basis this year. But we expect by the end of, we don't know what the governor will do with the bill, but we expect by the end that the bill will be enacted and our students will never have to experience going hungry at school ever again. So I tell that story just, I mean, I'm very excited that it happened, and I get the opportunity to thank Debbie for her visionary work at the beginning on this, but also to give you an example of the way that Hunger Free Vermont works. So we try to just help individual organizations, like individual schools, make programs work better to make sure that kids are getting fed wherever they are in their day. But we do the same with senior centers to figure out how they can keep their Meals on Wheels programs going and make up the funding gap that there always is in those programs. And we do the same thing with organizations that help people apply for 3 Squares Vermont. But then we hit roadblocks. We come to figure out that, well, there's a systems problem that's not working. So then we go and we talk to the state agency that administers that program. And we say, like, okay, people are getting really confused when they call the help line for getting help applying for 3 Squares Vermont. And these are the areas of confusion. Can we retrain your call center staff so that they say this instead of what they're saying? Or so we work to try to address administrative barriers. And then sometimes we come to the point where we realize that a legal change is necessary, either at the state level, at the federal level. And so we work on that as well. So that just gives you a little sense of who we are and the kinds of work that we do. We also have hunger councils. We have 10 of them. They cover every region of the state. We have one for Chittenden County. And those are volunteer groups of just community leaders who come together between once a month and once a quarter, depending. And they learn about what's going on with hunger in their region of the state. And they also raise challenges and issues that they're having and kind of network together to figure out what they're going to do about those issues in their communities. And we staff those councils and we provide them with data and information and help them work on different projects related to tackling hunger in their particular parts of the state. So we do a lot of kind of community-based work on that as well. So do people have questions for me about Hunger Free Vermont and what we do? Yeah, Sally.
Are you involved in any way in, one of the things we see at the food shelf is that there are people who generationally have never had really healthy food. And so I wonder if the kids in schools are willing to eat food that they haven't had before, food that's freshly cooked or healthier than what they're used to. Is that an issue, and does that have to be dealt with?
Well, yes, so it is an issue. And that part of what we do and why we are able to be so effective is that we don't do anything by ourselves. Coalition is the name of the game. So one of our long time partners, including on the effort to achieve universal school meals, is the Vermont Farm to School Network. And our vision, actually, I'm talking about the universal school meals bill that passed, but our vision collectively was actually farm fresh school meals for all. And it had 3 pieces, and we've gotten all 3 of them now, almost, knock on wood, passed. So universal school meals, that's the piece I already talked about. But the other 2 pieces that we actually got passed first were, first of all, a grant program that the state administers for farm to school and early childhood care program grants. And those give schools and childcare providers funds but also technical assistance from experts, the Vermont Community Garden Network and the Farm to School Network, to help them establish a community garden at their school, or build a greenhouse, or develop relationships with local farmers so that they are getting local farm products into their school, and actually having farmers come in and talk to the kids about, or having the kids go visit the farm to learn how things grow. Because what we found is that those kinds of connections are what help kids want to try a carrot or a parsnip or kale chips or whatever the case may be. And then also, in addition to that piece, we created a local food purchasing incentive program. And that is a program that provides some additional funding for schools to buy more local Vermont food. So beef and vegetables and fruits and all of those things, and have them in the school meal program. And it's kind of like a challenge program where if the school can raise the percentage of local food that they're buying and using in their meal programs, then they get additional funding from the state. So those three pieces together are in place, and they're making a huge difference actually in meal quality. You know, now the pandemic really hurt school meal quality because, you know, things had to get packaged up and they had to get delivered to individual classrooms because no one was using the cafeterias, and there were all kinds of supply chain challenges and all of those things. And so schools have staffing challenges you've probably heard of. So it's going to take a little time to kind of rebuild, but Vermont school meals are incredibly healthy, very high quality overall in our state. And that trend is only going to be strengthened now.
Are those
Yes.
same efforts being put into the Meals on Wheels that are going out to older folks?
Yes, so that's a totally different program, and it has incredible challenges. It's woefully underfunded at the federal level, and the rates haven't been raised in decades, literally. So that program has a lot of challenges with it. You try creating a really healthy, satisfying meal and delivering it for $3.48 a meal, because that's what they have to work with. But that having been said, all those meals do have nutritional requirements that have to be met. And here in our region of the state, there is a kind of our area agency on aging, Senior Solutions, has a approach to, or Agewell, I mean, sorry, wrong region. Agewell has a kind of a vendor that produces the meals, but they're able through that to have 8 different medically tailored meals available. So to address different health issues that are typical for people who use the program. Yeah, thanks for the question. Yes, Chris.
Success in education is often linked to children eating enough and eating high quality meals. Is there anything that you will be doing now that this program is going to be a universal program to track academics and any improvement in academic success? I'd be really interested in that kind of data. I mean, as a citizen and interested in this particular area, done a lot of work in schools, volunteering, have a background in food nutrition. So I know that that's important. You know, kids are well fed, they perform better. And we hear about the decline in, you know, academic success. So is there any way for the future, for grant funding, for other things, that as you begin this universal initiative, you can begin with the schools to track and see if there is any academic, if there's a correlation or any academic improvement?
Well,
is there any discussion?
Right. Well, so Hunger Free Vermont is not, we actually just don't have the capacity to do that kind of work, but we have already done it. So, as I said, our first efforts to work on fixing the problems in the school meal programs were to work with individual schools and individual districts. And so before, by 2019, before the first universal school meal bill was introduced in the state legislature, we had already successfully helped 25% of Vermont's public schools become universal school meals schools. And we worked with the University of Vermont's School of Education to do a study in those schools. And so we already have research in Vermont that's published that shows the change in those 25% of schools from before, to after they started providing universal meals and had several years of universal meals under their belts. And there's also national research. So there's research from New York schools, there's research from in other states as well. So there's actually a pretty high mountain of research that already has proven very definitively that universal school meals improves math and language arts learning, that it actually improves those scores more for students who weren't eligible for free and reduced price school meals, right? So there's also a huge gap between who's eligible for the programs and the cost of living in Vermont. That's 25,000 students in our state are over income. Their families are over income for school meals, but they are living below the cutoff for our child Medicaid program, Dr. Dinosaur, right? So those students will never be reached without a universal program. And those are the students who are going to benefit the most in a lot of ways. So we have a lot of evidence that has already proven the educational outcome connection to all students having access to school meals. Yes, Jude.
I'm sure everybody here is aware of the escalation in the costs for food these days, and it just keeps climbing. How do you perceive being able to deal with that? Because things really are escalating.
Yes.
Even within any given year.
Yes. Yeah, and that is such a critical question. And I have to tell you that without congressional action to make some changes to some of these programs, we're in a lot of trouble. Right now, or over the last 12 months in Vermont, hunger is at its highest rate that it has ever been since we have been recording it in recent years. 2 in 5 people in Vermont have reported some level of food insecurity in the last year, in 2022 into 2023, and that is the result of pandemic disruptions and the pandemic not really being over, but it's also the result of inflation. So, and we don't really have a good way to tackle that, because the income cutoffs for programs like 3 Squares Vermont are still very, very low, and they're not taking account of those inflationary changes. And so there are a lot of people in our state who really need help affording enough healthy food, and they are not eligible for these programs. So that is where the Farm Bill comes in. And the 2023 Farm Bill might seem far, far away from these issues we're talking about here, but that's the program where SNAP is authorized. And there's a big fight going on right now. You may have heard about the debt ceiling fight also. And sadly, the food programs, SNAP and Medicaid, have been put into that fight over the debt ceiling. And there's efforts to tie raising the debt ceiling to requiring more people to work in order to receive 3 Squares Vermont benefits or SNAP benefits. So that's going to make things even worse if that were to come to pass. So we are working at the federal level to try and make some changes in the Farm Bill, but frankly, Congress is not helpful right now. and is not focusing on what, ordinary people really need in order to live. Well, I think I'm probably about at the end of my time. Yes?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You can tell me if I'm right or not, but I think one of the lead sponsors this year was Representative Brady, Aaron Brady.
Yes.
From Williston.
Thank you for saying that. I should have said that. So Representative Brady, although she has not been a representative very long, has come out strong as an incredible champion for what people need to make it in Vermont. And she was the introducing sponsor for the bill this year, and worked really, really hard in the last couple years to it really advance the bill. So kudos to her for sure. Yes.
Quick
Chris.
question has nothing to do with what you're talking about your history. Do you use that to do work in historical sense? I mean, do you teach or you get into this sort of thing?
So I was hired at Hunger Free Vermont, having had zero experience with public schools. Well, not zero. I have a Master of Arts in Teaching degree, but basically zero experience with food, hunger, children, or anything that was my job description. But I will say that people ask me, do you miss teaching? So I did. I taught history for 15 years and did historical research, and I loved it. And people always ask me, do you miss teaching? And I say, I'm teaching every day, right? It's just not in a university classroom. And my research skills have come in super handy because, that's what we do at Hunger Free Vermont. We're the experts on all these super complicated federal nutrition programs. And we go help our local senior centers and places like that figure out those program rules and figure out every possible loophole we can find to make the programs work better. And that's what we do. So we have to be really accurate, and we have to be up on all the program changes, because that's a burden we can lift off the shoulders of all of the direct service providers who are out there on the ground every day, really trying to make a difference for people. So we take that role really seriously. Yeah. And thank you. I have some materials. So if you all are out and about, you're working with the food shelf, for example, you could take some of these. These are information about 3 Squares Vermont, and Crop Cash, which lets you use your 3 Squares Vermont benefits and get double the benefit at farmers markets, and the Richmond Farmers Market participates. And you can learn some more about that program yourself. So I'm going to leave these here, and I invite you to take them around with you when you are doing your other incredible volunteer and service work. And thank you all so much.
Thank you.
I would also say that one of the things you're teaching is awareness. People don't understand a lot about hunger. People don't understand that families with 1, 2, and sometimes 3 jobs are still not able to feed their children. So it's not an impoverished story necessarily. It's not a disability story. It's not just seniors. It's people who actually are trying very, very hard to improve their financial situations who still can't feed their children. So yes, the awareness is really important.
And should I say that, tell Anore that in your honor, thank you for speaking, we give instead of giving you a gift, we give a gift to the mentoring program at Williston.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great.
Would you do us the favor of picking one of these